friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Shelby and today we are going to be doing my February wrap-up and my March TBR. I had a pretty good reading month in February. I read 9 books and I am super excited to share them with you today. The majority of them are romances just because I tended to read a lot of romance around Valentine's Day, but we also got some thrillers and some fantasy books in there as well. So there are a bunch of books, so let's get started. The first book that I read in February was Even the Darkest Stars by Heather Fawcett. I gave this book 3.5 stars. This book follows Camden, who always has dreamed of becoming an explorer just like her mother, and when the royal explorer comes to her village about to set on this huge expedition for the emperor, Camden kind of jumps at the opportunity to travel with him and recover this famous relic that might help the emperor in his many battles. This book is kind of perfect for the winter time. It has such a misty mountain type of setting and was just very atmospheric and beautiful. I didn't really know what I was going into when I started this book. I had heard of this book before. I just have heard a lot of mixed reviews on it, but I can honestly say it did exceed my expectations, but there were still some things I didn't enjoy. I didn't like how the book was plot driven as opposed to character driven, mostly because there are a lot of high stakes adventures throughout this book, and none of these experiences changed the characters in any single way. It kind of felt flat for me in that regard. The reason I did score it so high is because I thought the plot was good and because I thought the setting was really good, but I would have loved to see a little more character development in there, and I don't know if I'm going to continue with the series. The next book that I read in February was The Real Deal by Lauren Blakely, and this was my first romance of the month. It is a new adult romance, so be wary of that going in. In this book, we follow April, who needs to bring a date to her family reunion, so her family stops pestering her to settle down. So she goes onto this website called Gigs for Hire and she finds a fake boyfriend. From there, she meets Theo, who is this actor boyfriend for hire, and she takes him on their family reunion where there are lots of fun and games. I'm usually not a huge fan of the fake dating trope, but I did really like it here. I loved April and Theo's chemistry. I thought that it was super funny and just a very rom-com kind of read. If you are looking for something light with not a lot of depth to it, this is a really good one to pick up. I gave it 4 stars. I love how April as a character was sex and body positive. I feel like a lot of times in these kinds of new adult books, women are very shy or portrayed as being very innocent, but that wasn't the case, and that kind of strong woman trope is something I really appreciate in my romance, so I just vibed really well with her character and I thought it all was really great, so I really loved The Real Deal. So the next book that I read this month was an ARC from NetGalley, so I read it as an ebook, and that would be The Right Side of Reckless by Whitney D. Grandison. I gave this book 4 stars and it will be released, I believe, on July 13th, 2021. So this book follows Guillermo, who has just gotten out of juvie and he is determined not to waste this new fresh start of his. It also follows Reagan, who is an A+ student, has the perfect boyfriend, perfect life, but she's feeling a little bit lost and finds herself wanting more than this perfect image she's always had. This book chronicles their relationship together, and what I love about this book is first the concept of consent in relationships, and second the fact that we get to see their relationship before they come together. We get to see their friendship and then their relationship, and that kind of development I really appreciated. This book did start off a little slow for me. It was hard for me to get through the first few chapters, but once we start seeing both Guillermo and Reagan kind of develop separately then come together, it gets a little faster and I really appreciated that. I also really liked how this book kind of ended at the very start of their relationship, so you kind of get the sense that there is more after the book ends, and usually I like a very clear-cut ending, but in the case of this book and just how it was written, I think kind of leaving the ending open-ended was a very good thing, so I really actually liked that part of this book as well. The next book that I read in February was one that I did for my blind date with a book vlog. I will link that vlog above and below, and I read The Rosie Project by Graham Simpson. So if you haven't seen that video yet, basically I ordered a blind date with a book, and this little beauty showed up, and I documented my experience reading a romance that I never really would have necessarily picked for myself. This book follows Don, who is a brilliant geneticist, very high up in his fields, but he has some issues interacting with people and knowing what to say at the right times. He kind of thinks that the dating scene isn't really for him, so he creates a questionnaire or kind of like a checklist for his future wife. And he goes on all these dates kind of like checking off if these women meet his criteria. Then he meets Rosie, who is literally the opposite of everything on his criteria, which immediately cancels her out as a wife. But Rosie's also trying to find her biological father, which is something that Don can help with as a geneticist. So they kind of form this friendship as they both look for clues as to who Rosie's father is. And through that time together, Don and her start getting closer, and Don kind of has to reevaluate his very strict criteria for what he wants in a life partner. As I said, I talked a lot about this book in my vlog, but more or less, I really enjoyed it. I gave it 3.5 stars because while it isn't something I don't think I will ever read again, I did enjoy reading this. I thought that the romance was really cute. I thought having the entire book from Don's perspective was very unique just because he thinks in such an orderly and logical way. Kind of seeing him go through the motions and go through his thoughts from writing was just a really interesting experience and something I've never really seen before in books. I do think that towards the end the characters kind of acted in ways that I didn't think they should, so we kind of lost that character identity towards the end, but I did like how it ended up and I just thought it was really cute. So I know there are more books in this series. I probably will not read them, but it was a really fun experiment, and as I said a few times now, if you want to hear more, kind of watch me go through this book, I will link that vlog above and below. Moving on to a thriller. This month I read the sequel to Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson, The Vanishing Stare. I love Truly Devious, the first book in the series. I thought it was so good. I'm not a huge thriller person, but this series is changing my mind. This is the second book in that series, and I believe there is one more, maybe? I'm not sure, but I gave this 4 stars. The series as a whole follows this academy called the Ellingham Academy, where there was this really famous murder that took place a bunch of decades ago. So we kind of get that past perspective of the murder investigation from the beginnings of the school, and then you also have it in the present tense where you have a student who is trying to solve those murders but is kind of thrown off when people close to her keep dying or disappearing as she looks into them. So it's kind of this dual perspective. It's super cool. I loved this book. It ended on a cliffhanger. Maureen Johnson always just leaves me wanting more. I do think that this book felt a little slow at times just because the first book was so fast-paced and like kept my engagement the entire time. There definitely were some twists and turns in this book that took me for a loop, and honestly, I am not closer to figuring out what is happening here, and I love that. I am so excited to begin the next book. I thought this was a really great sequel, and if you are also on the fence for thrillers and mysteries and things like that, I highly recommend checking out this series. Next up is a book that I cannot believe I have not read before, and it is one that has been so talked about here in the book community, and I'm so excited to say it is my first 5-star read of the month, and that would be Heartstopper Volume 1 by Alice Oseman. This book follows Charlie, I believe, and he is gay and he is the only person out at his school, and he kind of forms this friendship with Nick, who is like the head rugby player, and this kind of follows their friendship maybe turning into something more. I thought this book was just so precious and adorable, watching their relationship develop to sitting next to each other in class, to becoming really good friends, to maybe starting to develop something romantic at the end of the book. I thought it was a great progression. I am a little sad that we didn't really get to see their actual romantic relationship develop in this book. I thought that we would get more of that, but it kind of left off at a cliffhanger on the end, which I guess makes sense because now I'm gonna buy the other book. So I guess Alice Oseman, it worked. I'm gonna get the next one. I thought the illustrations were really beautiful. I loved the setting, and I just loved how natural their chemistry seemed to be on the page. I don't usually read like a lot of romantic graphic novels. I usually stick with Marvel, DC, and like a darker graphic novels, just because that's the books that I grew up with. So it was really fun to read like a romantic one for the first time, and I absolutely adored it, and I gave it 5 stars. A drastic change from that last 5-star book is Mr. Malcolm's List by Suzanne Elaine, which I gave 2 stars. This is a Regency romance, and we follow Mr. Malcolm, who is a very wealthy and notable individual, and he is looking for a wife. And he similarly also has a list of qualities he would like to find in a wife. So kind of similar to the Rosie Project, but not. When his list cancels out a vengeful debutante, this vengeful debutante enlists her friend from the countryside to come in and woo Mr. Malcolm and break his heart. But her friend ends up falling in love with him. I picked this up at Barnes & Noble because it seemed short and cute and just like an easy read, and in the end I was just really upset that I picked this up because I found the characters to be extremely snotty and unlikable. I found their character development to be quick and nonsensical. I didn't like how like innocent and pure our main heroine was. It seemed very tropey to me, and the entire thing was just a big old trope. And I'm not saying filling a book with different well-known tropes is bad. I'm saying if you don't add your own spin on it, it's boring. And these had no characterization. There was just nothing new about this book. It was just bleh. There were some good moments in this book. There were some funny moments in this book, but sadly it wasn't enough for me to give it a 2.5 or even a 3-star rating. The next book that I read in February, which is a big step up from Mr. Malcolm's List, was A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. My most anticipated book of the year. Yes, this was my most anticipated book of the year, and I've already come out and I've already read it. So like, what am I doing for the rest of the year? Just kidding, there's a lot of books I'm excited for, but I was very excited for this one. A Court of Silver Flames is the continuation of the Court of Thorns and Roses series by Sarah J. Maas, following one of the main characters' sisters. I thought this book was so wonderful, and once again I do have a vlog where I go through my process of reading it and have a full spoiler review at the end, so I'm going to be a little bit lighter on my review here, and if you would like to hear that full review, I will link it above and below. I thought that this book, while not action heavy, was really emotionally heavy, which I kind of appreciated more. Our main character Nesta has been through a lot of traumatizing experiences throughout the last few books and throughout her life, and this book we are seeing her finally having to confront that trauma and deal with it. And I know a lot of people don't love Sarah J. Maas because of lack of diversity and other stuff, and I totally get that, but I do think her books are good to read because it's not often you see people going through trauma heal throughout a book. It's just not done that often, especially in fantasy books. And to see a fantasy book that is so character driven and so focused on mental health and healing was so nice for me to read as someone who has a lot of mental health issues. This book, it just kind of like it just pieced my heart together. I absolutely adored it, and I loved the emphasis on female friendships in this book, on healthy romantic relationships. This is her spiciest book yet, so just fair warning when you go into it. But I loved this book so much, and I annotated it, and I just had so much fun with it, and I gave it 5 stars. The last book that I read in February was actually a buddy read with my friends Sadie and Delancey. I will link their channels down below. And we read The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. I'm not quite sure what I expected going into this. I had heard really great reviews, but what I read was just nothing like what I thought this book was going to be, and that's not a bad thing. This book follows a girl named Nora Seed who takes her own life at the beginning of this book. She feels that she has no motivation, nothing to live for, and she's kind of wandering aimlessly through her life with kind of no purpose. As she is dying, in her subconscious, she visits this place called the Midnight Library, who has a librarian, and basically it is this place between life and death where she is able to look at all of her regrets throughout life and go into different versions if she had made different choices. So for every choice you didn't make, there is a book in this library showing you where your life would have gone if you had made that choice. So this book is kind of Nora going through these different versions of her life and trying to find meaning again. And it's this really beautiful and heartbreaking book. There are a lot of trigger warnings, so I definitely recommend reading them before you pick up this book. But I thought it just had something really beautiful to say about life and the meaning of life and how we can't waste any precious second of it. So I thought this book was actually really beautiful, and I highly recommend it to anyone who just wants a little bit of a stronger emotional book. I thought this was really beautiful, really a stunning work from Matt Haig, and I definitely want to read more from him now. But this was a 4-star for me. Those were all the books I read in February. Now we're gonna move on to the books that I want to read in March. Sorry. So there are a lot of books that I would love to get to in March, but I'm only gonna share 4 of them with you guys because a lot of them are leftovers or rollovers from last month. So I'm going to share with you guys some of the new ones I'm hoping to get done. All of these are backlisted books of mine. I am really trying to get through my backlisted books this month. I have so many books on my shelf and I would like to read all of them before I buy any more. The first book is the Fairy Loot book of January, and that would be Lore by Alexandra Bracken. So this is a modern mythology inspired retelling about the Greek gods, and I know there's some kind of competition, and I know it involves Medusa and Athena and all these other Greek characters, and they're all fighting for the right, I believe, to return to Olympus. That is a very basic summary, but this edition is stunning. It has this like beautiful snake on the edges, and the cover is so different, and the inside the cover is even more stunning. So I'm super excited to get to this book. I've heard a lot of mixed reviews on it, so I'm kind of trying to ignore those so I can form my own opinions, but we'll see. Next up is actually a nonfiction book. I know, crazy, but that would be Clanlands by Sam Heughan and Graham McTavish. So I am a massive fan of Outlander, which is on Starz, which is this TV show based on a book series. And this book is written by 2 actors from that show who kind of take you around the history of Scotland. So if you enjoy the show, I think you will enjoy this book as well. It's whiskey, warfare, and a Scottish adventure like no other. And I absolutely love Sam Heughan and Graham McTavish. I know they have a really great friendship, and I'm excited to see how that translates onto this book. Next up is not shocking, but it is The Hand on the Wall by Maureen Johnson. This is the 3rd book in the Truly Devious series. As I said earlier, I finished the 2nd book and I'm eager to start the 3rd and kind of see where this series is going. I think this is the 3rd book in the series. I'm not sure. I saw that she was publishing something else this year, and I have no idea if that is with this series or something else, but I guess we'll have to see. But I'm definitely hoping to get to this month. Finally, a book I really want to get to in March is Chain of Gold by Cassandra Clare. It has been a while since I picked up a new Cassandra Clare series. I am firmly an Infernal Devices and Mortal Instruments girl. I never picked up The Dark Artifices, but I have heard amazing things about Chain of Gold, so I'm super excited to pick it up this month. And that is it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please leave me down below the books that you read in February or are planning to read in March. If you guys liked this video, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. Hit the notification bell to get updates on when I post. I post every single week, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!